Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I'm back with some more Esoterica. Today we're diving back into the work of Mr. Elipas Levi. This is Transcendental Magic, it's Doctrine and Ritual. We are reading aloud and discussing as we go along the various points brought to light by the text. It's not the format for everyone, but people do find value in it, so you are more than welcome to tag along as we continue our exploration. Before we begin, however, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in the terminology, there will be several playlists linked in the corner above, in the box down below, along with the original source material and the link for my book, so that you can get a better understanding of who I am and why I say the things that I do. With that being said, we are going to dive in and continue our exploration of Transcendental Magic, its Doctrine and Ritual, and hopefully wrap up the Doctrine today with Chapter 21 and 22. Divination. Dentes furca amens. The author of this book has dared many things in his life, and never has any fear retained his thought a prisoner. That is an outright lie. That is an outright lie. You can tell from the biography. We went through that as the very first video in here, right? That is an outright lie. It is not, at the same time, without legitimate dread that he approaches the end of the magical doctrine. It is a question now of revealing, or rather reveiling, the great secret, the terrible secret, the secret of life and death expressed in the Bible by those formidable and symbolical words of the serpent, who was himself symbolical. Nequaquam moriamemini sed eretis sicut di scientis bonum et malum. I do not speak Latin. I do not know what that means. I'm hoping that they explain it to us. One of the privileges which belongs to the initiate of the Great Arcanum, and that which sums them all, is divination. According to the vulgar comprehension of the term, the divine signifies to conjecture what is unknown, but its true sense is ineffable to the point of sublimity. To divine, divinity, is to exercise divinity. The word divinus in Latin signifies something far different from divus, which is equivalent to a man-god. Divin, in French, contains the four letters of the word Dieu, God, plus the letter N, which corresponds in its form to the Hebrew Aleph, and Kabbalistically and hieroglyphically expresses the great arcanum, of which the tarot symbol is the figure of the juggler. Whoever understands perfectly the absolute numeral value of Aleph multiplied by N, final in words which signify science, art, and force, who subsequently add the five letters of the word Devin in such a way as to make 5 go into 4, 4 into 3, 3 into 2, 2 into 1. Such a person, by translating the resultant number into primitive Hebrew characters, will write the occult name of the Great Arcanum, and will possess a word of which the sacred tetragram itself is only the equivalent and the image. You will not. Right? First off, it is entirely possible that there will be something that comes from this complicated mathematics, but it is probably not important, right? To take Aleph and multiply it by N, which is supposed to be the same thing, which you just said, right? Multiply this by itself, and what do you get? The square? I don't know. But multiplied by N, final, in words which signify science, art, or force, who subsequently adds the 5 letters of the word divin, because, why just not mix Hebrew and English, in such a way as to make 5 go into 4, 4 into 3, 3 into 2, 2 into 1. Complicated mathematics to make it seem like it's doing something, right? And I'm here to tell you there is a word. I have the word. It cannot be written down in any way which will ever express what it says. Any approximation that we have is just an approximation. Yahweh is just an approximation. It is a sound. It is not necessarily even a name or a word. It is something. You will get it if you do the proper procedures, prayer, fasting, and meditation. If you do those things, you will receive the word. But nobody can write it down for you in a way that it is translatable. It is simply not possible. That's why I can't give you the word. You have to find it yourself. To be a diviner, according to the force of the term, is hence to be divine, and something more mysterious still. I want to point out you are not a God, you are a representative thereof, right? God has individualized your soul into your meat suit for you to go through 5D space and have experiences. That is true. But you are not a God. You can act in part ways where you resemble it, right? You can act for the betterment of all humankind in every action that you take. That would be a way, exceedingly difficult to do. You can do the magical practices which I describe in these various playlists, right? But that doesn't make you divine. I have healed myself through the use of the Holy Spirit, but that doesn't make me God. All right. Now, the two sides of human divinity, or of divine humanity, are prophecies and miracles, neither of which come from you. To be a prophet is to see beforehand the effects which exist in causes, to read in the astral light, to foresee the future events, right, with accuracy. That's what prophet is, right? That's kind of the problem with prophecy, one of the many problems with prophecy. But go back to the prophets. How many of them actually had what they said come true in the manner in which they said, in the timing in which they said? Pretty close to none of them, right? There were parts that were played out. Those were the parts that were probably recorded so you could see them. I mean, you are not divine. We see through a mirror dimly. And the farther ahead you try to see, the less clearly you are going to see. You can see a week ahead fairly easily through divinatory measures such as tarot. If you go a month, you're pushing your limits. If you go a year, you're really not even doing anything, right? You're looking too far ahead. If you're trying to see the end times, you're just going to get what you want. Take that how you will. The author of this book will be asked whether he is a prophet and thaumaturge. No, he won't. Let inquirers recur to all that he wrote before certain events took place in the world. What events? And as to anything else that he may have said or done, would anyone believe his mere word if he made any unusual statement? Now, this, we don't have it, right? You should have absolutely included in here your correctness in prophecy. If this is where you were dealing with it, it should be clearly explained. I would not let you recur all that I wrote before certain events took place. What events? What did you write? How are we to know that 150 years later? You should have put that in here. Furthermore, one of the essential conditions of divination is never to be constrained, never suffer temptation. In other words, being put to the test. Never have the masters of science yielded to the curiosity of anyone. The Sibyls burned their books when Tarquin refused to appraise them at their proper value. The great master was silent when he was asked for a sign of his divine mission. Yeah, there was a reason for that. Agrippa perished of want rather than obey those who demanded a horoscope. To furnish proofs of science to those who suspect the very existence of the science is to initiate the unworthy, to profane the gold of the sanctuary, to deserve the excommunication of sages and the fate of betrayers. The essence of divination, that is to say, the great magical arcanum, is represented by all symbols of the science and is intimately connected with the one and primeval doctrine of Hermes. See the playlist, Ancient Lore. In philosophy, it gives absolute certitude. In religion, the universal secret of faith. In physics, the composition, decomposition, recomposition, realization, adaptation, and philosophical mercury, called Azoth by the alchemists. If you remember, that is inside your head. In dynamics, it multiplies our forces by those of perpetual motion. It is at once mystical, metaphysical, and material, with correspondent effects in the three worlds. It procures charity in God, truth in science, and gold in riches, for metallic transmutation is at once an allegory and reality. And I will point out again that we do not have any evidence that anyone in history has ever performed a metallic transmutation. As all the adepts of true science are perfectly well aware, yes, gold can really and materially be made by means of the stone of the sages, which is an amalgam of salt, sulfur, and mercury. Remember that this, right, salt is the body, sulfur is the spirit, or the soul, and mercury is the spirit. That is the key components, right? Body, soul, spirit. thrice combined in Azoth, your head, by a triple sublimation and a triple fixation. 1, 2, 3. I wonder if that fits. Right. Yes, the operation is often easy and may be accomplished in a day, an instant. At other times it requires months and years. But to succeed in the great work, one must be divinus, a diviner, in the Kabbalistic sense of the term. And it is indispensable that one should have renounced, in respect of personal interest, the advantage of wealth, so as to become its dispenser. Raymond Lully enriched sovereigns, planted Europe with institutions, and remained poor. Nicholas Flamel, who, in spite of his legend, is really dead, only attained the great work when asceticism had completely detached him from riches. He was initiated by a suddenly imparted understanding of the book Ashk-Mezareth, written in Hebrew by the Kabbalist Abraham, possibly the compiler of the Sefer Yetzirah. Now, this understanding was, for Flamel, an intuition deserved, or rather rendered possible, by the personal preparations of the adept. I believe I have spoken sufficiently. Divination is, therefore, an intuition. True. And the key of this intuition is the universal and magical doctrine of analogies. Also mostly true. By means of these analogies, the Magus interprets visions, as did the patriarch Joseph in Egypt. And there is no reason to believe that he ever existed. According to biblical history, that does not verify it. The analogies and the reflections of the astral light are as exact as the shades of color in the solar spectrum and can be calculated and explained with great exactitude. I don't know about the terminology there, right? The analogies and the reflections of the astral light are as exact as the shades of color in the solar spectrum. Color kind of blends, right? And can be calculated and explained with great exactitude. I don't know about that terminology, right? I don't know how to frame an argument against it, so I'm not going to try, but something doesn't fit. It is, however, indispensable to know the dreamer's degree of intellectual life, which, indeed, he will himself completely reveal by his own dreams in a manner that will profoundly astonish himself. Somnambulism, presentiments, and second sight are simply an accidental or induced disposition to a dream in a voluntary or awakened sleep. That would be a meditative state. That is, to perceive the analogous reflections of the astral light, as we shall explain in our demonstration of the ritual, when providing the long-sought method of regularly producing and directing magnetic phenomena. I have a little bit of experience in that. See my book or the playlists. As to divinatory instruments, they are simply a means of communication between diviner and consulter, that serving merely to fix the two wills upon the same sign. This is why tarot works, right? In my estimation, right? It seems to be about the self-identification. You identify yourself with these various groups. So whether it's Gemini, Aquarius, or the collective, however you identify yourself when you go into it. Simply a means of communication. The tarot cards are fixed for the most part. There's a whole lot of unbalanced decks out there. That's a whole problem. But there's like the Rider-Waite decks, like the ones that I've got right here. Right, these are just the regular Rider-Waite decks, and they are prearranged signals. They are terms that we have agreed on, just the exact same way the words are. These things we have agreed on collectively to be divinatory, and so they work in that fashion. Right? As a general, very rarely as a quite specific. And so that is true, right? The diviner's instruments is simply a mean of communication between you and spirit, right? Spirit is quite literally God limited from the infinite into the finite is spirit. The spirit is entirely God, but it is not God in his entirety. And so when you are trying to divine, you are communicating with spirit. And that is why it is so difficult to see too far ahead. And if we have these predetermined signals and you pull this card and we know what this one card means, then we can make an interpretation according to the will of spirit. So this appears to be correct, right? And that doesn't matter if it's runes. It doesn't matter if it's astrology, even though that is much more subjective. It doesn't matter the tools that you use. The tools hold no power in and of themselves. They are predefined explanations that we have to try to interpret what Spirit wants to tell us. And so this is mostly true. Vague, complex, shifting figures help to focus the reflections of the astral fluid, and it is thus that lucidity is procured by coffee grouts, mists, the white of eggs, and etc. Now these right here do not appear, in my estimation, to be true at all. I've watched several, right, in the same way that I did with tarot, in the same way that I did with astrology. I'm doing that with the other divinatory measures, right? Tea leaves, coffee grounds. I haven't seen the mist or the white of the eggs, but tea leaves and coffee grounds, I can tell you pretty reliably, seem to be entirely subjective. They do not appear to have any real correlative effect, right? And that is using the same method that I used for the tarot, where it was shown that they do, right? So take that how you will. If you read coffee grounds, I'm not here to shit upon you. I'm just not going to listen to you. And by listen to, that is not that I cannot take in the information, because if I am proven wrong, I will adjust myself. Like I did that with tarot. And so if I find it to be reliable, then I will change it, right? I will say that. But so far, from my experience, I have zero reason to believe that the coffee grounds have anything to do with anything. Which evoke fatidic forms existing only in the translucid, that is, in the imagination of the operators. Vision in water is worked by the dazzlement and tiring of the optic nerve. That is entirely possible, which then resigns its functions to the translucid and produces a brain illusion in which the reflections of the astral light are taken for real images. Now this would be to put you into a semi-meditatory state. Now, what I tell you to do is set your prayers, then do your meditation, and then when you're coming out of your meditation is the time to do all of your work, right? Meditation, you're not thinking about anything. You're not pulling energy. You're not moving energy. You're not looking ahead. Prayer, you're just asking for things and talking, right? When you get done with the meditation and you come out of it, there's a sense of oneness. You are with everything. And that is the time when you would do this. Whether there is water or a mirror or an orb or a candle or whatever, this functions in the same way for all of those specific things. And it is your mind getting to a relaxation point so that you can allow whatever images, or like I don't have images, but whatever ideas happen to pop up at that point are more divinatory, especially if you are looking for that, right? And so this is more of a direct communication as opposed to using tools. Now, this isn't related to the tea leaves, right? This isn't, I'm just being subjective. This is, I'm listening, and that is different. And so I do place a good bit of weight here if it is shown that the person doing it is balanced, right? If they're out there talking about how melanin is important, they're not balanced. If they're talking about genitalia being important, they're not balanced. If they're using tarot cards where they made the emperor into a woman, not balanced, right? If you changed the page into the princess, not balanced. Don't listen to it. It's pretty easy. Hence, nervous persons of weak sight and lively imagination are most fitted for this species of divination, which, indeed, is most successful when performed by children. That is because they are less prone to try to insert what they want into what they hear. Let us not here misinterpret the function which we attribute to imagination in divinatory arts. It is by imagination, assuredly, that we see, and this is the natural aspect of the miracle. But we see true things, and in this consists the marvelous aspect of the natural work. And here is where I get to talk about me again. I have something called aphantasia, right? I have not the ability to close my eyes and visualize anything. No matter how much I desire something, I cannot visualize it. But I can still manifest. I can manifest well. I have manifested healing, right? Do you know how hard it is to heal yourself? I've done it, and it wasn't even that hard. I just follow the procedures. I mean, I didn't try to do it myself. I just allowed the things to work on their own. Imagination, assuredly, that we see. I can manifest without seeing, right? So that is not the key component there. Now, having your target in your mind, what you want, clearly defined, absolutely helps. But you don't necessarily have to vision, right? To have to envision it. It can be a hindrance to be able to, right? It is entirely possible that the things that I have been able to do is because I lack the ability to deceive myself, right? If I have a vision, if I have something, I know it's not from me because I can't create that. It is simply impossible, no matter whether I want it to happen or it's subconscious. Either way, I don't see anything, right? When I have a memory, it's like words running through my mind. I hear it, or I just know where things are, but I don't see them. And so I can't fool myself. If I see something, it had to have come from somewhere, and that doesn't necessarily mean it came from the correct source. That is up to discernment. But if I see something, there's no way I did it. And so this imagination part, it is vital, right? You should have a clear idea of what you want. But it's not absolutely necessary. I have done it without that part. We appeal to the experience of all veritable adepts. Telling you something here. The author of this book has tested all kinds of divination and has invariably obtained results in proportion to the exactitude of his scientific operations and the good faith of his consulters. I bet that his divination went exactly like his necromancy did. The tarot, that miraculous work which inspired all the sacred books of antiquity, that's a big statement. That is a big statement. Is, by reason of the analogical precision of its figures and numbers, the most perfect instrument of divination. And he was not dealing with the Rider-Waite deck, right? He was dealing with a different deck. We've established that as we went through, and so most perfect, right? Now, in my estimation, it probably is, right? In this iteration, maybe in that iteration too. Why? Because it is predetermined definition that we are using to determine the things the Spirit is telling us. And so it will probably work regardless of the configuration of the cards. But most perfect is a big statement, and inspired all the books of antiquity just kills me. And can be employed with complete confidence. Its oracles are always rigorously true, at least in a certain sense, and even when it predicts nothing, it reveals secret things and gives the most wise counsel to its consulters. Wow, big statements all around, huh? Always rigorously true. Now, this is up to interpretation. Now, if you are determined that it will be true, you will find that it is true. That is as true for me as it is for anyone else. You will find the things you are looking for. When you buy a new car, you will see that type of car on the road because you are keyed into it. So you will find what you are looking for. If you are looking for racism, you will find racism, right? Whether it's actually there or not. If you're looking for sexism, you will find it whether it's actually there or not. You will find that what you are looking for. And so always rigorously true can be up to interpretation, but there is nothing that is going to be always when it comes to divination. There will always be variables because you have free will. You have the ability to change anything contained within any divinatory procedure. Every single bit of it is up for option. None of it is predetermined, right? These are all just the options. These are things that might appear to stand in your way or to assist you. Is it mostly true? Yeah, I would stand on that. Always true? That's a rough one. Aliette, who in the last century from a hairdresser became a Kabbalist and Kabbalistically called himself Atelia, reading his name backwards after the manner of the Hebrew. Aliette, I say, after 30 years of meditation over the tarot, came very near to recovering everything that is concealed in this extraordinary work. However, he ended only by misplacing the keys, through want of their proper understanding, and inverted the order and character of the figures without, at the same time, entirely destroying their analogies. So great are the sympathy and correspondence which exist between them. The right, and now I'm going to make it real clear here, right? I'm about to start doing tarot, right? I'm planning on doing a daily reading. That's why I got these two decks over here that I use. I'm still getting comfortable with the procedures and stuff, but I will be doing it quite a bit in the what's the word? I'm losing the word. Intuitively, right? As opposed to the standard definitions, because I have some different definitions, right? If you're unclear about that, I have a tarot playlist where I went through some alternatives, right? I have the standards, that's in there too. That's a separate video, but I have 3 where we went through the process of enlightenment as detailed by the tarot cards, and it seems to be a better fit for a lot of the things. Even when I'm watching other people read, I'm keeping that in mind, and it fits quite well, sometimes better than the standard interpretations. And so I will be drawing greatly upon that. In some cases, it might actually destroy the analogies, so there's that. The writings of Attilia, now very rare, are obscure, wearisome, and, in style, barbarous. They have not all been printed, and some manuscripts of this father of modern cartomancers are in the hands of a Paris bookseller who has been good enough to show them to us. Their most remarkable points are the obstinate opinions and incontestable good faith of the author, who all his life perceived the grandeur of the occult sciences, but was destined to die at the gate of the sanctuary without ever penetrating behind the veil. How would you know? You've never been behind the veil yourself. He had little esteem for Agrippa, made much of Jean Belot, and knew nothing of the philosophy of Paracelsus, but he possessed a highly trained intuition, a volition most persevering, though his fancy exceeded his judgment. His endowments were insufficient for Amagus, and more than were needed for a skillful and accredited diviner of the vulgar order. Hence, Attilia had a fashionable success which a more accomplished magician would perhaps have been wrong to waive, but would certainly not have claimed. When uttering at the end of our ritual a last word upon the tarot, we shall show the complete method of reading and hints of consulting it, not only on the probable chances of destiny, but also, and above all, upon the problems of philosophy and religion, concerning which it provides a solution which is invariably certain, and also admirable in its precision, when explained in the hierarchic order of the analogy of the 3 worlds with the 3 colors and the 4 shades which compose the sacred septenary. All this belongs to the positive practice of magic, and can only be summarily indicated and established theoretically in the present first part, which is concerned exclusively with the doctrine of transcendental magic and the philosophical and religious key of transcendental sciences, known, or rather not known, under the name of occult. And that is going to bring us to chapter 22. The summary and general key of the 4 secret sciences: Signa, Deote, Pan. That's interesting. Let us now sum up the entire science by its principles. Analogy is the final word of science and the first word of faith. Harmony consists in equilibrium, and equilibrium subsists by the analogy of contraries. Absolute unity is the supreme and final reason of things. Like, this equilibrium subsists by the analogy of contraries is the vices and virtues, right? That's right, the equilibrium between the vices and virtues, the analogy of contraries, lust and chastity, greed and charity, wrath and anger, or wrath and love, and wrath and anger, right? Contraries, the coins. That's what this is talking about. So subsist by the analogy of contraries absolutely fits, right? And harmony consists in equilibrium, not cleaving to either side, like we talk about so very often. Absolute unity is the supreme and final reason of things. Now, this reason can neither be one person nor 3 persons. It is a reason, and reason eminently. To create equilibrium, we must separate and unite. Separate by the poles, unite by the center. To reason upon faith is to destroy faith. To create mysticism in philosophy is to assail reason. Reason and faith, by their nature, mutually exclude one another, and they unite by analogy. Analogy is the sole possible mediator between the finite and the infinite. Dogma is the ever-ascending hypothesis of a presumable equation. What? No, dogma is rigidly holding to something whether or not it actually makes sense. Right? It is the rituals by which things are executed, and they don't always have to make sense. For the ignorant, it is the hypothesis which is the absolute affirmation, and the absolute affirmation which is hypothesis. No circular reasoning going on there. Hypotheses are necessary in science, and he who seeks to realize them enlarges science without decreasing faith. For on the further side of faith is the infinite. We believe in what we do not know, but what reason leads us to admit. To define and circumscribe the object of faith is, therefore, to formulate the unknown. Professions of faith are formulations of the ignorance and aspirations of man. The theorems of science are monuments of his conquests. The man who denies God is not less fanatical than he who defines him with pretended infallibility. God is commonly defined by the enumeration of all that he is not. Man makes God by an analogy from the lesser to the greater, whence it results that the conception of God by man is ever that of an infinite man who makes a finite God. We will pop up and look at this real quick just to see what it is. Adonai, which means God. This is the four cherubim, right? The eagle, the man, the bull, and the lion. And Pittacor and Ezekiel. Something Kabbalistic. Man can realize that which he believes in the measure of that which he knows not, and by reason of that which he does not know. And he can accomplish all that he wills in the measure of that which he believes, and by reason of that which he knows. The analogy of contraries is the connection of light and shade, of height and hollow, of plenum and void. Allegory, the mother of all dogmas, is the substitution of impressions for seals, of shadows for realities. It is the fable of truth and the truth of fable. One does not invent a dogma. One veils a truth, and a shade for the weak eyes is produced. The initiator is not an impostor, he is a revealer. That is, following the meaning of the Latin word reveliare, a man who veils afresh. He is the creator of a new shade. Analogy is the key of all secrets of nature and the sole fundamental of reason of all revelations. This is why religions seem to be written in the heavens. Sorry. Written in the heavens and in all nature. This is just as it should be, for the work of God is the book of God. And in what he writes should be discerned the expression of his thought, and consequently of his being, since we conceive him only as the supreme thought. And here I will refer you to the Bible study, where there are 162 videos of why the Bible is not it. Dupuy and Volney saw only a plagiarism in this splendid analogy, which should have led them to acknowledge the Catholicity, that is, the universality of the primeval, one, magical, Kabbalistic, and immutable doctrine of revelation by analogy. Analogy yields all the forces of nature to the magus. Analogy is the quintessence of the philosophical stone. The secret of perpetual motion, the quadrature of the circle, the temple, resting on the two pillars of Yakin and Bohas, the key of the great arcanum, the root of the tree of life, the science of good and evil. Define the exact scale of analogies and things appreciable by science is to fix the basis of faith and thus become possessed of the rod of miracles. Now, there is a principle and a rigorous formula, which is the great arcanum. Let the wise man seek it not, since he has already found it. Let the profane seek forever, and they will never find it. Metallic transmutation takes place spiritually and materially by the positive key of analogies. Occult medicine is simply the exercise of the will applied to the very source of life, to that astral light, the existence of which is a fact, which has a movement conformed to calculations, having the great magical arcanum for their ascending and descending scale. Alright, so a couple of things. Metallic transmutation, again, it is possible. We have done it, but it has not been through alchemy. Right? We have taken a bombardment device and changed bismuth into gold, and I'm fairly certain that they've done it with lead, but it is an extremely costly procedure. You do not receive nearly as much gold from it as you would recompense for the energy involved. And so while we can do it, there's not really any practicality to it at the moment, and it was not done, as far as I am aware, outside of that very specific instance. I don't have any reliable accounts of any person actually making it. They all talk about it's possible, but none of them said, I did it. Occult medicine, simply the exercise of will applied to the very source of life, to the astral light, the existence of which is a fact. You could read my book and come to that exact same conclusion. Right? The miracle of me healing myself in 3 different ways was simply the exercise of the will applied to the very source of life, the astral light. That is quite literally what I did. Now, the astral light and the Holy Spirit are exactly the same. There is no differentiation there. And that is the logos, not a person, the light. And so, yes, right? Conform to the calculations, having the great magical arcanum for their ascending and descending scale is placing a doctrine and a dogma upon it that is not necessarily useful. The universal arcanum, the final and eternal secret of transcendent initiation, is represented in the tarot by a naked girl who touches the earth only by 1 foot, has a magnetic rod in each hand, and seems to be running in a crown held up by an angel, an eagle, a bull, and a lion. I don't think that is in the current tarot. Fundamentally, the figure is analogous to the cherub of Ezekiel, of which a representation is here given, and to the Indian symbol of Adonahare. Why did they add a J to Ezekiel? Why turn that into Yezekiel? Which again is analogous to the Adonai of Ezekiel, who is vulgarly called Ezekiel. Explain that. Somebody hit me in the comments with that. I mean, obviously it's a Kabbalistic thing, right? And whether the Kabbalah came before or after Ezekiel is definitely up for debate. But, I mean, in the entirety of the Bible, there is never a J attached. So, the Hebrews didn't even have a J, right? All of that is the H and the Yah sound. The comprehension of this figure is the key of all the occult sciences. Readers of my book must already understand it philosophically if they are at all familiar with the symbolism of the Kabbalah. It remains for us now to realize what is the second and more important operation of the great work. It is something, undoubtedly, to find the philosophical stone, but how is it to be ground into the powder of projection? I got instructions on that in the book as well. What are the uses of the magical rod? Again, instructions. What are the real power of the divine names in the Kabbalah? None. The initiates know, and those who are deserving of initiation will know in turn if they discover the great arcanum by means of the very numerous and precise indications which we have given them. Well, maybe that is contained in the ritual, but it has absolutely not been contained in the doctrine. Why are these simple and pure truths forever and of necessity concealed? Because people like power and other people are stupid. Because the elect of the understanding are always few on earth and are encompassed by the foolish and wicked, like Daniel in the den of lions. Moreover, analogy instructs us in the laws of the hierarchy and absolute science, being and omnipotence, which must be the exclusive possession of the most worthy. The confusion of the hierarchy is the actual destruction of societies. For then, the blind become leaders of the blind, according to the word of the Master. Give back initiation to priests and kings, and order will come forth anew. So, in my appeal to the most worthy, and in exposing myself to the dangers and anathemas which threaten revealers, I believe myself to have done a great and useful thing, directing the breath of God, living in humanity, upon the social chaos, and creating priests and kings for the world to come. Alright, so I am exposing myself, right? I've said many times. I'm out here giving the knowledge out. Whether or not you take it, right, you have to dig for it. This channel is open for everyone. Not everybody is going to stick around. Only the people who are truly seeking the knowledge are going to listen to me talk for an hour to get a piece of the nugget, right? Or to spend the money to buy the book where it's contained in its entirety. I put it out there, however, for the whole world to view, and I have had nobody show up, right? No Great White Brotherhood, no Masonic temples, none of that. That's not to say that they won't. Maybe they will, maybe they are, but it's kind of too late. This is out there. It's going to stay out there. I'm not taking it down. And so, but we should be focusing upon improving ourselves, becoming the example, and if people ask us how that came to be, then we can tell them, right? We should be focusing upon being above the social chaos, creating priests and kings out of ourselves for the world to come. That is kind of the great work, the mental alchemy, right? Back to the text. A thing is not just because God wills it, but God wills it because it is just. It said the angel of the schools. It is as if he said. The absolute is reason. Reason is self-existent. It is because it is, and not because we suppose it. It is or nothing is. Could you wish anything to exist without reason? Madness itself does not occur without it. Reason is necessity, is law, is the rule of all liberty and the direction of all initiative. If God exists, it is by reason. The conception of an absolute God outside or independent of reason is the idol of black magic and the phantom of the friend. That is an assumption, right? I believe it. I do. I believe that everything that has ever happened has happened at the express will of God. But it is an assumption that I make. The demon is death, masquerading in the cast-off garments of life. The specter of Heron's Kessept, throned upon the rubbish of ruined civilizations, and concealing a loathsome nakedness by the rejected salvage of the incarnations of Vishnu. Here ends the doctrine of transcendent magic. And that brings us to the end of the first section of the book, and hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a series of somewhat difficult topics. I understand I hold some unconventional beliefs, and I have a tendency to step on toes when I relay those. It is not intentional, but I do not apologize for it. Discerning the truth from what is fake, right? It's hard. It's up to individual judgment. I tried to present my evidence for saying things, right? I tried to tell you the reasoning behind it, because that is part of the mental alchemy, right? You take part of it on faith, absolutely, but you got to take part of it upon repeatables, right? Upon things that you can put into practice. I have a whole outline. There are 8 chapters in my book. It is 25,000 words, which is rather short. You can read it in like 2 hours, 2.5 hours, depending upon you, right? It contains density, right? The last 2 chapters in particular, maybe even the last 3, are really dense, right? The first 4 or 5 is me explaining how I got there, the processes that I used outside of the spirituality. And then the last end of the book is telling you directly, this is the steps, these are the muscles that I contracted in the manner that I contracted them in. These are the prayers that I said. These are the things that I do, laid out in exact order, exactly how I did it. We didn't have any of that here. This was a whole doctrine with no meat. Right? There was a couple of things that we could get a little nibble on, but for the most part, it wasn't. It's because he didn't know what he was talking about. He was repeating other people's things. He didn't have the faith. He didn't have faith his whole life. Read the biography, right? It was evident through his life that he was not putting into the practice the things that he's talking about here. He was taking other people's knowledge and relaying it without internalizing it at all. There is good information in here. It is confounded by a lot of extra, a lot of things that aren't necessary. In my estimation, the Kabbalah is completely not necessary. That doesn't mean that you cannot find value in it, right? There are all kinds of other faith systems that you can find value in. Kabbalah is simply one of them. I am trying to take the systems out, right? The restrictions, the initiations, the groups, the clubs. I don't want none of that. I want it freely available because I believe that we can handle it. Now, will there be repercussions? Probably. Will some of them be negative? Absolutely. Because people are stupid. People run into things. They go blindly. The last 3 chapters of my book start with a warning. There's another warning inserted in a couple of them, right through the middle of it. Because the warnings are necessary. Don't be stupid. Make sure that your intentions are correct. Follow the 8 laws of creation. Do the energy transfers in the correct manner. Do nothing outside of consent. There are a lot of considerations to be taken into place, but none of those are listed here either. That's a problem, right? There is meat here. It's just very little of it. It's a skinny animal. It has been starved by lack of faith. If you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, a share, a follow. Throw me a comment if you agree or disagree with anything that was stated. Put it in the box down below, and if it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. If there is another work you would like to see me discuss in the manner that we are doing here, drop that in the box as well. And if you really like what I'm doing, hit me with that super thanks. Consider joining for a membership or picking up a copy of my book. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you were here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole way and complete, just the way that you are. And this has been Pit Steak. Peace.